talking about what's happening on campus. Today we've got just a stellar group of folks that I'm excited to be presenting to you guys, and thank you guys so much for being a part of this. If everybody that's on this panel can unmute their phones and we'll get started. Let me make a couple of it, or let me make the introductions really quick. Joining us first is former co-host of Student Housing Insight, Dr. April Hicks Convalinka, who is now the Executive Director of Housing and Res Life at University of Central Florida. We also have Vern Rogers from the University of Florida, who's the Associate Director of Housing Operations. In Georgia Southern University in Statesboro, we have Pt2 who's the Executive Director of University Housing. And Pete, if I murdered your name, you can slander me if you want to. And at Coastal Carolina University, near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, we have Stephen Harrison, who is their VP of Auxiliary Services and Housing. And then at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, we have Alan Blattner, who is their Executive Director of Housing as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being a part of today's webinar, and looking forward to getting into this. How's everyone doing?
Doing great, thanks.
Great.
Very well.
Well, so I mentioned we've got basically 3 guideline questions that I'm hearing from the student housing audience and from folks that are in higher ed as well, that I really just wanted to pick your brains, and hopefully as a part of that, you can share with both the on-campus professionals that are throughout the country that are looking to the Southeast region and wanting to understand more about what the universities here are doing. And then also for our off-campus operators, give them some kind of insight as to what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis as you're getting ready for students to come back this fall. I think everybody on this panel is their universities have announced intentions of coming back with in-person classes at the beginning of fall. And I think that, Vern, I see your message here about your camera. I'll see if I can get that to see if I can fix that. But yeah, as you guys are getting ready to bring everybody back, we want to jump in and find out what's going through your heads with all this. So as it relates to preparing for fall 2020, what is keeping you up at night as it relates to your institution navigating the impacts of COVID-19? And April, since our audience, it's been so long since they've heard from you, we'll start with you on this one.
Hey everybody, it's great to be with you, and hopefully our nuggets of information will be helpful to you. There's a lot that is keeping me up at night, but first and foremost, I would say that safety is a very high concern for me, not only safety from a standpoint of COVID-19 and the impact that it's made on everyone, but how do we keep our staff safe? How do we keep our students safe? And as we think about returning to campus in the fall, how do we do that in a way that does keep our students safe? ACHA just came out with some guidance last week that provided some considerations that we all should keep in mind. And so we're taking a look at that, and also that aligns with what the CDC is recommending. But safety is of top concern and keeps me awake. There's also the financial impact piece that goes along with that. And so as we have not welcomed students back for the summer, there's a financial impact. And as we think about different scenarios to how that's impacted us, that's a concern as well. So I'll pause there because I know that we have other panelists, but I would say safety and the economic impact, financial impact to not only our program, but also our university.
Great, thanks. I know you mentioned those additional guidelines. Really quick, can you just, if there's a website or something that you can point folks to that may not have seen that yet, I think that might be helpful.
Sure, I'll add it in the chat.
Perfect. All right, let's move on up to Georgia. Pete.
Technology has me staying up late at night, obviously. No, I think it's similar things. You know, we are making plans for a multitude of different scenarios based on guidance we are receiving from the federal, state, and university system of Georgia. And so we are working within those frameworks. And within those frameworks, you know, there's wide parameters of what we need to be preparing for the fall. So like states across the country, we are, you know, still making assumptions. And based on those assumptions, we've got several different plans in place. The difficulty that's keeping me up at night is the impact of implementation of some of those plans on my staff, you know, and on our students, and what that may mean to more or less a traditional college experience. Obviously, this next year will not be that typical traditional collegiate experience that we want students and staff to keep. So those are keeping me up at night. We were talking about before we came on, you know, several different ideas for what that will look like as far as occupancy levels, potentially moving into this next academic semester.
Great. Well, Stephen, how about the Coastal Carolina?
Yeah, thanks, Wes. Appreciate you having me on. The things you mentioned are similar to our other folks who've talked so far. I'll add in, and it goes to safety, but other factors as well. Our students, we bring them here with all intention to develop them and teach them and help them grow. And they do exactly what we want them to do, which is they show up and they challenge every rule and every guideline and every smart thing we tell them and their parents tell them. So the things keeping me up at night are the things they normally do, which are risky on any given Tuesday. They're going to be a whole lot more risky on these coming Tuesdays. And so absolutely, we are working very, very hard to make sure that students, staff, faculty are safe, that we are going through every permutation of financial models that make the services we provide in housing and dining and other things that we have relationships to on campus and beyond work well. But we also want to do the thing that we are called to do, which is bring people together and help educate students. And I'm not certain that we can do that terribly safely, no matter how brilliant we or our state or federal leaders are. And so it's more of the same. I read something interesting a couple of weeks ago that said, you talked about the fatigue we're all experiencing right now. And among the comments was the idea that not only are we watching TV all day long, we're also on TV all day long. And so we won't be virtual anymore, but we certainly will have a whole new version of stressors and anxieties. And I'm interested to see how it will go in the fall. And you know, our provost has been talking a lot here about how he's been a genius one day and an idiot the next. And I think that's true. No matter what we say today about what we intend, something will be different tomorrow. And the best laid plans will be thrown out and new plans will be made. So I'm hopeful and skeptical all at the same time. But it is, you know, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, so we'll be fine.
So, Stephen, your position there is a little bit unique because you've got auxiliary services, you know, underneath your umbrella as well, and there's a lot of things that go into that: transportation services, even we spoke yesterday, even the lock systems for the doors and entrance to the buildings. Compared to housing, is housing the biggest headache out of all of that as far as planning for this fall, or is there another part of what you're?
You know, the biggest headache today was our university golf course, which is part of my responsibility, and the fact that we need to get it open. we need to get it open because throughout this whole thing, our state has had guidelines that allows us to keep it open if we needed to, but we're a state institution. And so we need to those financial questions, stop losing money. And so we're working to figure out how to do that safely based on some various guidance. Part of my responsibility on campus includes all the auxiliary things on our campus, as would be true on anybody else's campus, but goes beyond that to include mail services, our full custodial operation on campus, even in academic areas, our full grounds operation, including athletic fields. And so, we're already talking seriously about, are we going to have athletes who need safe fields to play on in a few weeks? Because they'd be coming back for summer camp in a normal year early. We are having really productive conversation about what class changes will look like. So there are any number of models of so assuming everything's good and positive and we're allowed to have classes face-to-face in one way or another. And the residence halls are open for whatever version that looks like. And we're able to say, I'm not making this up, remove half the desks from every classroom to keep them social distance from each other while sitting in college algebra or whatever the heck class they're taking. They still have to change classes. And so they're going to be hurrying through corridors and stairwells and running up to the faculty member who we hope has a mask on to ask them a question about, I've got to be absent for this thing, or I don't understand that thing. And so I only have so many custodians. And in a world in which enrollment is likely to be down, state of South Carolina has asked every institution to forecast its budget based on a decrease of 15% enrollment. And there are institutions like Coastal Carolina University, which draws a significant amount of its enrollment from out of state, and a lot of that enrollment from the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, where we're not certain what is going to be true about their ability to travel, about the financial realities facing those families. And so we've got some serious questions to ask. So even in a moment where enrollment was great, I don't know that we have enough custodians to do all the things that the guidelines suggest. But when enrollment's not great, and we've got to make really hard decisions about the way we're going to be staffed on campus, some of our most, complimentary things that we hear from prospective students and families who come to visit is how beautiful the campus is inside and out. And we're not going to be worried so much about beautiful as we're going to be worried about safe. And so it's a broad set of considerations as we're trying to figure out everything from what we'll do in residence hall spaces to dining halls and to classrooms. And honestly, on a given day, housing is perhaps the least of my concerns. And I'd say a couple things about that, and then I'm going to be quiet. One is Coastal Carolina University. This is the second time this year we've had to do something remarkable because we had to evacuate for a hurricane in the fall. And we've had to do that or some version of that each of the last 4 years. So we already had conversations and knew what we were doing relative to refunds and emergency planning and preparedness and all those things. So this is kind of where housing lives. If you're a housing professional on a university campus or college campus in this country, this is what we do. We've never done it quite like this and for quite this kind of a thing, but we know what we're doing. But the custodial staff, for all their expertise and experience on the main campus, when emergencies happen, they stay at home and wait until the emergencies are over. And so this is new for all of us. And it's putting new stress and new anxiety into the lives of folks who feel quite fortunate to be able to work at a place that typically feels like just all the continuity and comfort and confidence in the world. And we're having to approach our work very, very differently. So that's what's happening on the Grand Strand in South Carolina today.
Well, great. Well, let's go up to Alan up at Chapel Hill, and then we'll go over to Vern down in Florida.
Sure. Yeah. Again, thanks for having us and for putting this together. I have one short-term and one longer-term concern that I'll toss out there. For us, it's the entire ecosystem of housing and supporting our students with housing. We have a very complicated and integrated relationship with all the off-campus providers. We typically house around 10,000, they house around 20,000. If we play with that ecosystem at all, if we turn our buildings into singles, we were talking about this before we went live, I'm going to dump 4,200 students into that market. It can't support that. there's not enough empty beds, as we saw in Charlie's stat. We're 95% rented already. So we're going to create a problem for our students if we head in that direction. Not to mention, if we push people off campus, there's already a parking and transportation shortage in the community, and that's with full buses. You have to socially distance on those buses where they're only at half capacity, and we've doubled the ridership. We've got another problem. Dining is probably our most complicated. If we have to, only put 25% of the seats in those, our dining halls are already packed. And we already are shipping lots of people to the off-campus market for that. And if those restaurants aren't at full capacity. And so the whole ecosystem really needs to be thought through. And thankfully at Chapel Hill, we are trying to think through it in a very logical and methodical way to make sure that we don't unintentionally cause another problem while we solve some of the safety concerns that April and others have brought up. Longer term, what I'm a little bit worried about is, we just handed out about $10 million in refunds. If we have to be only half full, we're gonna take in less revenue. And I've got some big problems with my facilities that I need to solve over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And we were squirreling away cash to hopefully address some of those, and we're headed the wrong direction. And those problems aren't going to go away. And some of those are problems that are compounded by this problem. I'm still about half window air conditioning units. Those do not create the same air quality in the buildings. Certainly. And air quality has become a real focal point of generations to come. And so I really worry about how we're going to continue to be able to work together on campus and with our off-campus partners to solve some of these problems.
Alan, I drove through the campus probably sometime back in the fall. It may have been, I believe it was before class started in the fall, so it may have been last summer. And you guys had several units that looked like they were, or several halls that looked like they were in the middle of renovation. How many are you still going to have many that are offline this next semester, or are all those back online now?
Yeah, they're all back online. I mean, you may have been seeing some summer work. We have one building that's been off all year while we did some significant renovation to it. But we'll be back with our full complement come fall, assuming construction goes well, and we all know how that goes from time to time. But no, we've got nothing from that perspective that's standing in our way. It's purely a matter of how we choose to use the spaces we have. Whether we go half occupancy, whether we take buildings offline for isolation and quarantine. We're still trying to decide on those logistics, and so that's the decrease I'm talking about, not because of construction.
All right, Vern, how are things in Gainesville?
Pretty good. We've at least had some great weather through this whole thing down here in Gainesville. I think for me, on top of what everybody else said, there's so many facets to this, but the thing that I keep seeing every day is the stress levels of the people that work in our department. Stress for their families, stress for their jobs, right? They see things, right? They know that we're refunding money. They know that occupancy in the fall can be a challenge. And so you have those stresses, and then you have the stress that people are in a situation where they're here to bring people together, and they're here to commingle and to work together and to be in close quarters. And now all of a sudden, none of that is allowed, right? In a situation where, normally it'd be like, all right, movie night in the lounge. And now it's, well, I guess, let's get off your professor's lecture and let's on the screen and just have a Netflix movie watching party. And so working with staff that their jobs are going to be fundamentally different, at least for the fall, if not for much longer. And then they're having all of these stressors that they're working through just in their own personal lives. And, as staff members with children or elderly relatives who they live with or care for, how do they come do their jobs when their jobs are going to put their families at risk, or if their family members can't go to school? And then the other part too is what do we do with all those physical spaces, right? Like we're gonna have a bunch of lounges that aren't, students might need to cook in those lounges, but how do I make sure that they're, you know, making good choices with that space? And then, I mean, to Alan's point, right, if they can't go to the dining hall, they're gonna have to cook somewhere. So they might, you know, be more people using our kitchens in the halls than ever before. And so are we ready for those types of things and that the cleaning load and, you know, keeping people safe? And so those are just my couple of things to add to the great points everybody else had.
Gotcha. So I didn't have this question. I didn't preface you guys with this question, but you bring up something interesting, Vern, because there were, I've got a lot of friends who have spouses that are in the healthcare industry, and, you know, they had a lot of concerns about, you know, quarantining their spouse, you know, be it in a basement or a guest bedroom or something like that. As you guys are thinking about, you know, your staff and yourselves once students come back on campus, how are your families thinking about it? Are they excited that the classes are going to be resuming back on campus, or is there a little bit of anxiety that's going along with it? I think there's going to be anxiety either way, right?
Sure.
There's a lot of pressure, I think, on staff. I mean, we had that during our move out phase, and that was a period of a lot of uncertainty, both in what we were hearing from the CDC and other things, and we were pushed out in front of the public. Even though we did very well with social distancing, there was still a good amount of people coming back into a relatively small college town here in Statesboro. Our campus in Savannah managed it pretty well, but here, you know, moving out that many people over the course of 4 or 5 days still was a little bit of a logistical thing. We've got health concerns. We've got furlough days. There's a myriad of things now that we're working through with our staff. And housing doesn't do well with furlough days and things like that. You know, we can't take days in August. We potentially can't take certain days, but that's going to be coming to us. So we'll be working through some of those issues as well as the safety concerns with some of our staff. And we literally are managing those on individual cases. And again, to your point, HR is going to give us a lot of guidance on how we manage our at-risk employees and putting them toward the front lines, you know, and talking about custodial staff that may be going in and out of rooms and interacting at a different level with folks. Those are all things we're going to be addressing.
And I would say we've started conversations on our campus about how to keep staff safe, but there's all kinds of different thoughts, some of them based in science, some of them based in feeling, about what that looks like. Does that mean plexiglass bubbles around every desk? Does it mean, I mean, there's all kinds of people with all kinds of thoughts and feelings. And so we're really trying to stick to the science and manage the feelings, because, you know, I think that's just a prudent course. The other reality, and our health center director talks about this all the time, we cannot invite students back if we're going to treat them like they're all walking diseases. And we're going to fear them, and we're going to hold them at bay. And now we can do that responsibly and ethically and smart, but they can't feel like we're afraid of them every time they walk into an office or every time they encounter their RA. And so we have to somehow get around that corner and approach this in a different way.
Well, that leads into that next question, which is, you know, what guidance are you needing from government, public health organizations, in order to be ready for this fall?
Yeah, Wes, I would offer, and it piggybacks on what Pete and I were just talking about, which is, you know, one of the realities of at-risk employees is that, and speaking of science and feelings, we're going to need in the state of South Carolina, the State Division of Human Resources, to talk to us about what the realities are about what we can and can't require.
Yep.
Because you get perilously close to discrimination when you begin to start trying to care for a human being who might be of a certain age, or you may have knowledge of a pre-existing condition, or any number of these things that may make you worry for them, whether or not they're worried. And so what we might be trying to do to keep a staff member safe and therefore keep also additional students and other staff safe, might put us in a whole other set of circumstances where we've created a cause of action that otherwise may not have existed. So that's a big challenge. And to your question about spouses and whatnot, it's not uncommon in the world of student affairs and housing to have two people in the family work on the same campus or in higher education. So my partner, my wife, is the director of accessibility and disability services on our campus. And so there's some degree of, yay, let's get the heck out of this house, because I didn't know you were that kind of person on the Zoom calls. That's interesting. But also there's a real worry about, should we get sick, or our own children will be going back to their final year of middle school and all the interesting exploration and unwise choices that will bring. And so it's going to be a broad set of concerns and challenges for all of us. And I think Alan's point is great, which is we can't, it's true in every year. And I've loved some of our colleagues who do diversity and equity and inclusion work. And for years, we've heard folks talk about this idea that, in higher education and maybe uniquely as an industry, we ask these people to come to our campus and we're surprised and unprepared for them when they show up.
Right.
So if we're asking them to come, we have to be ready for them in one way or another. And that can't be, they'll stay away from me and I actually don't have enough staff to clean up after you and whatever else it might be. We need to be ready and whether we actually have the confidence, at least act and speak as though we do.
Yeah, okay.
Well, no, I was just going to mention, I know April mentioned some resources earlier, but didn't know if that is, I know all of you guys have seen that document, but wasn't sure if, one, if everybody's been able to get through it yet, and two, is it something that you're still scratching your head saying, well, yeah, but what do I do in this situation? Anything like that you're still looking to get some guidance on?
So I think it's a good document. I know that ACHA came out in March with some guidance that certainly, I know our International Housing Association, the Kuhawai, has been a partner in that document. And I think it's a good guide. It's good guidance, and as it aligns with the CDC. On our campus, our Director for Student Health Services has also been a tremendous resource to us, and as he's played a part in some of the development of the guidance through ACHA. They're not requirements, they are guidance. And so I think at every institution, you have to decide where you'll land. And I think it's based off of geographically what's going on within your state. I know that each state is different and is opening up their states differently. What's happening in New York is different than what's happening in Florida. And so, yes, we have these different forms of guidance, and I think it's going to come down to an institution decision as to which direction we're going to go. I know that on our campus, we have an ESERT team. It's an emerging issues and crisis response team that's looking at how to bring everyone back safely. And so how do we return to work safely? How do we return to housing safely? We're actually going to be embarking on a task force that is looking at how to return to housing, but it's not just university-owned housing or managed housing or affiliated housing. We're also bringing in our off-campus partners to be a part of those discussions. So how do we bring students back safely, and also keeping that in mind, but also knowing that academic success is going to be important in everything that we do. And so I think right now we've got the guidance that we need, but as we all know, it's ever changing. And at any point in time, a resurgence could occur. And then we're pivoting again and making different decisions.
And I don't know if folks have seen the YouTube video that I think really captures this, especially around the pandemic that we're in the middle of. But it's this video where they say, well, you ought to stay at home unless you want to go out. Or you ought to wear a mask unless you don't want to wear a mask, and then don't wear a mask. You know, there's so many contradictions. And I think the guidance is trying to steer people gently, but because it's broad guidance, it doesn't get specific enough sometimes to solve problems. And I think if we wait, we're going to be waiting a long time for that guidance to get very specific, because there's all kinds of reasons to stay general in these kinds of guiding documents. And I'm also very fortunate that many of the people that the CDC calls for guidance are on our daily phone calls. We've got a world-renowned epidemiology faculty on campus, and many of them have been coronavirus researchers for years. We have a faculty member that was in Wuhan who went from there to South Korea. After there, he went to Italy. And now he's on our phone calls helping us strategize based on that experience. But they don't even know concretely how to guide this or where to send us. They can give us great kind of guideposts. They can give us good questions to ask and hard things to consider. But I think we'll be sitting here this time next year if we're waiting for guidance that actually tells us how to use our beds, or how many people can be in dining halls, or how to keep people safe. It's not that kind of situation. You know, similar to Steve, when he's got to look at a weather map and try and figure out whether to evacuate campus for a hurricane. It's just not going to be that clear. And thankfully, we're good at this because guidance is hardly ever very clear, or descriptive or prescriptive. So I'm not really waiting around for that because I just don't think it's coming.
And I'd add quickly, the guidance often makes it worse.
Yeah.
So during the midst of this, we've gotten guidance about other critical campus issues from federal authorities, which only stands to demonstrate they don't have any idea what the day-to-day realities of a higher education institution is, housing or otherwise.
Yep.
And so I think I agree with that. We've got to use the experts we have locally. We've got to do the very best that we can in good faith. You know, there's some of the folks who were testifying in front of the U.S. Senate in the past couple of days indicated a critical thing, which is that the public health guidance has to take the lead where it can.
Yeah.
But it rightly doesn't take into consideration the economic and financial realities that we all face. And so perhaps not in any of the communities that we represent, maybe Peter might be different, but there are places in this country where if an institution of higher education can no longer be sustained, if it were to close, so too does the community it lives in.
Yeah.
And so we gotta have a very broad view of what we're doing as we're making our decisions. And I think we're gonna find that our towns, our cities, our counties are following our lead to some degree. And that's far beyond the tax base, but really how do we act and how do we educate? And so, yeah, the guidance will be helpful. But as in so many other things, it's mostly going to be what we get called to the carpet on and get in trouble with later versus helping us do something now.
No, I'm glad you said that, because it's at kind of the beginning of this, I felt like there was a lot of folks on the administration side of higher ed that, you know, were looking immediately to, you know, their governors and the health organizations. And you know, what I've seen in the past couple of weeks is, you know, just that mentality of, no, we got to do this, because if we don't do it, one, our jobs are at stake. Two, this is going to be an impact that will be multi-generational if it's something that we don't, you know, get a hold of right now. And yeah, I do feel like, especially you know, Alan, in a situation like you have at Chapel Hill with a fantastic medical school there that is, you know, probably more in the midst of this than anyone else. I think it's fantastic to see these universities stepping up and saying, no, this is the way we're moving forward.
Well, it's been interesting. One of the very first things one of our faculty said on our planning call was the guidance really aside, It's about the goal. And if the goal is that nobody gets sick, the only thing you can do is keep campus closed. And all that means is they're going to get sick somewhere else, but they won't get sick on your watch, because we're not going to stop people from getting sick no matter what we do. So then it's a matter of preparing adequately to manage that in a safe and sustainable way. And so I think, you know, but yet we have some parents that's not going to be a very reassuring message. You know, and so it's about how we communicate with our students and our families about what it is that we're going to be able to provide. And it's not going to be someplace where we're going to be able to stop people from getting sick. As Steve mentioned, students are going to be students, and we're going to tell them to wear masks, and they'll do it while we're looking, and then they'll go to the fraternity house. You know, and so but that's our reality. And if we're not ready to embrace that, then we ought to be closed. But if we are ready to embrace it, there are some things that we can affirmatively do to prepare for that, both on an education side, on a prevention side, and on a reactive side. And if we're not thinking about all those things, then I think we're going to be in some trouble.
Yeah. So just to take a quick survey from everybody, you know, part of the guidelines that we talked about this before we started broadcasting, doubles versus singles. Are you eliminating doubles? Those that can't answer that question, feel free to answer that question. And wonder, I know Steve, you got some thoughts on that for sure.
Yeah, here at Georgia Southern, we are planning on full occupancy, including our traditional halls. And in our other planning, we're looking at other options as well, of course. But we're looking at kind of, you know, either we're open or we're not. And then I think we're all going to be turning our heads to the West Coast, you know, based on what they just decided in California. You know, we've got colleagues there that the decision was made and they weren't necessarily made aware it was coming. And they're making those guesses too now that classes are going to be all online. Are we still open? How many people are we going to house? And in what manner are we going to house them if they need to be housed? So
yeah,
that was a you know, a bit of a punch in the stomach for folks when they did that, as we are planning to open here in Georgia. So yeah, I just want to also comment that I feel so much better that my kid's at Chapel Hill since Alan's there. So that makes it better. But yeah, but yeah, we're planning on fully open with those other options.
gotcha.
Yeah, for us at Coastal West, we've got several permutations of, you know, what the plan is and what we intend. And so what I can say right this minute is we intend to be open. And what is always true is when a student goes in to select their own bed, not every single bed is available to them. So we are intentionally holding spaces for any number of things: isolation and quarantine plans, the reality that we might be told we can't do some level of doubles or triples or any of those kinds of things. Enrollment realities. I'm not sure I need every bed that I have. So some of our off-campus friends have been very generous, saying, we'd love to help you with any overflow, or if you've got to go to all singles and all these kinds of things. And I'd love to be able to, and of course I can't do this within the state of South Carolina system, sign my own contracts and start lining that up and do whatever we thought was necessary. But I don't have any solid sense of exactly who's going to show up on August the 13th. No. And there's a long time between now and then, and all the things that are going to happen to get to that point. So I think for us, it's we've got, you know, any given year we've probably got 2 or 3 occupancy, you know, capacity plans set up. We're going to move beds here, move beds there, and do any number of things. And this year that's times 10. And so we'll see what that ends up looking like come August. But we're preparing for all possibilities, I suppose.
Anything with setting up quarantine? You mentioned that, Steve and Vern. I know you and I spoke yesterday. I know at Florida State they leased some off-campus houses, from what I understood, for possible quarantine. I think that was really for the summer. I don't think that's for this fall. I don't want to speak out of turn, but are you guys setting up things for a quarantine in advance, or is that something that's still being worked out?
Yeah, we had to put together a pretty quick plan during the spring semester. We had a group of students who were in Italy, and they got recalled back really quick, and it was a program where it was their last semester of their senior year, so they didn't really have the option to go home, and so we put together a plan for that for those students, and so we got that ready. So I think we've got a plan in place. I just think when I think about quarantine, if you have a case in a full traditional style residence hall, at that point, how do you quarantine hundreds or dozens of students?
Yeah.
So no matter what plan we come together with, it's really quickly overwhelmed by just the quantity and the community on campus.
Yeah, for us, I mentioned kind of our older real estate earlier that we need to tend to. What that means for us is if we don't have but 17 single bedroom, single bathroom accommodations in our stock of 10,000. So for us to create a single bedroom, single bathroom configuration, I have to lose between 4 and 8 beds in order to create that. So we've right now pulled together about 60 beds of quarantine and about 80 beds of isolation. That was at the cost of close to 500 beds. And so we can only do that so often before it's just that ecosystem falls apart that I talked about before, that we just create a housing shortage and a transportation problem for our students. And so, like all things, it'll be about balance, and it'll be about being prepared but not being over prepared. But it's going to be an educated guess, and we're going to hope we get it right.
Yeah. So, guys, on this last question, as it relates to what are you hearing from, or as it relates to enrollment, what are you hearing from your institution as well as neighboring institutions regarding enrollment projections for this fall? Anybody care to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I can offer quickly, Wes, a couple of things. One is nobody knows what the heck they're talking about. Almost every institution pushed based on the ethical professional guidelines of the nation's admissions officers professional association, pushed their priority deadline from May 1 to June 1 anyway. So that's based on we got to give them more time to decide. But more time to decide just means more information they're gathering and a clearer sense of what the heck the financial situation looks like in their family, and we just simply can't know. So we could be up in this category, down in this category. This week looks good. This other week didn't look so great, but there's nothing to compare it to. So in a question of admissions yield, like housing occupancy, like any number of other things in other sectors of the economy, you've got to have week over week, point over point data to compare it to. And there simply isn't any relevant data to compare it to. So I think I mentioned already that in the state of South Carolina, in an abundance of caution, and I hope that's as deep as it will get, is that the Commission of Higher Education has asked every single institution, public and private, because of the way some of our aid works in this state, to also go to private institutions, to provide information about how deep the losses would be if we experience a 15% drop in overall enrollment. And that makes us a fundamentally different institution overnight. And so you think of that, the bigger institutions in this state who are serving tens of thousands of students, we're in a great year just above 10,000. 15% is a lot. And so, Alan talked about those reserves that we in the housing world do so brilliantly. We work so hard to squirrel them away and get ready for things. And then the institutions rightly make decisions about those monies. And so, whether that's defeasing bonds early and paying, doing refunds, reallocating some of those monies to other things that are higher institutional goals. We'll see. But it seems to me those who speak don't know, right? And so everybody who's sure about how it's going to look one way or the other, I don't buy it yet. I'm waiting for the receipts, as it were.
Yeah.
Well, as someone who often speaks without knowing, I will, I'll jump in that all of our numbers right now are pointing up. So I don't know what I'm talking about, but seriously, our numbers are up, and we don't have a traditional deposit for housing, but because we require all of our students to live with us, but the number of contracts that first years have filled out are tracking with higher enrollment, as are signing up for online orientation. So all of the internal benchmarks would say that we're going to fare all right in this. And I think we're the type of institution that in general might fare well in this, if any of us do. That said, I have no idea. We're playing, we've called it the great chicken and the egg game, where we're running at our students saying, if you'll just tell us what your plan is, we can make a plan. And they're saying, well, if you'll just tell us what the plan is, we'll tell you if we're coming. And that's returning students as well. It is not just about recruiting a new class. It's about retaining the students that you worked so hard the past 3 and 4 years to recruit. And so I will join Steve in saying we have no idea. We think we're going to be okay right now, but we also haven't announced our plan. And then our customers at that point will react to what they think of our new product and make a decision. And I think that ought to make all of us a little bit nervous.
Mm-hmm. I would say our summer numbers at UCF are really good, are actually higher than last year. So for the summer, we're doing well. But the fall numbers, we're still waiting, and we'll see what happens as more information comes out and students and we make a decision. Right now, we're going to be open, but as more decisions are made, that number could increase. From a housing application standpoint, our numbers are higher than last year. We actually have shut off our application process because we're well over what we have had in years past, and so we're in a good place. But still, yet, I think there's a lot of unknowns, and people can make decisions at the last minute and decide that maybe staying home is the better option. Although I do think the parents are ready for their students to get out of their house and to get back on campus.
So April, are your summer numbers up? Are they virtual, or are you doing face-to-face over the summer?
No, it's virtual.
Okay, same with us, and those numbers are up. Yeah.
April, did you guys end up moving because you had 3 total sessions, you had one kind of overlapping session that was still going to be in person. Did that end up going to virtual as well?
Yeah, all of ours are virtual.
Gotcha.
All summer sessions are virtual.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we're similar here. I can speak for Georgia Southern, not all the institutions in Georgia, but we're seeing the similar things. Yeah, we lowered our fees associated with summer school, and we've got high attendance for summer school. And then we're trending. We do have an application fee, even though we do have a first-year live-on requirement. And, our numbers are trending higher than last year for first-year students. But again, I think everybody's saying the same, and that's on the Statesboro campus. Our numbers are relatively flat as they were for our Savannah campus as far as residential students moving on to campus. So we seem to be in a good place. We're not panicking yet, even though our numbers are trending higher. But yeah, we're looking pretty good. And I was just going to share that I was on a phone call today with our apartment association. We are a member of the apartment association, and really helping them with the information that we're seeing and trying to answer so many questions that they may have. I literally had 15 questions that they gave me. And it was a great Zoom call, great conversation with those folks. So we're engaged with, and that just is those relationships that we may need moving forward.
Great. Vern, I think you're the last one. Are you able to talk about enrollment at all at this point?
Yeah, I mean, for everyone I talk to, I think, everyone's just kind of wait and see, to Alan's point. Like when you come up with a plan, we'll come up with a plan and vice versa. But I think the wild card here is, this this incoming class, they had their prom taken away, their graduation taken away, and their parents aren't willing to take away their freshman year of college just yet. But as we get, 2, 3 more weeks, a month down the road, and as nationwide unemployment starts to soar, financial realities are going to set in for a lot of our students. And there's going to be some students who are going to be fine, but others who aren't going to be able to make, even those students who are fully funded to come to our institutions, they're not going to be able to get here, to make that sacrifice, to leave their families behind with no income just to come to college. And so I think that's my thought for enrollment. I mean, every parent I talk to, they ask the same question: how big are the beds? How do I live in the single room? All those. And then the last question, they go, oh, but what if there's no classes in the fall on campus, right? That's the last question they ask us usually. But I think everyone's hoping for the best. And I know that I am for students and want to have them here. But I think to everybody's point, I'll tell you in August.
Yeah, I completely understand that. So, well, guys, thanks so much for giving some extra time. We're now at 4:13, and I know we got to a little late start as we were figuring out the technology here. But thanks for being so gracious with your time. Thanks for agreeing to be on this. I hope you got something out of not only talking to each other, but also listening to Charlie and seeing kind of what the numbers are from an off-campus standpoint. So big thanks to you guys. I wish I was in an auditorium where we could give you guys a big applause, but you'll just have to do with my golf clap, I guess. And for everyone else, don't forget that next week we are doing this every single Wednesday with this What's Happening in Your Region series. And next week we'll be doing the interior Southeast, which is Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. So please make plans to be there. If you've signed up through FeedLoop, you should have gotten an invite or an email showing you where you could download the invites for each of those. You are registered for the entire series if you've registered for today. So that is already taken care of. Guys, thanks so much, and I hope to see you tomorrow on Planning for Fall 2020. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Wes.